It is so good to see you guys today. And I love it when we're lively and active. This is what church is supposed to be. It's awesome. You're just a great looking group of people today. I see a few new faces. I know that we got many here today that are here to celebrate in baptism. And we're pumped out of our mind that you're here for that. This is going to be a highlight of the day for sure. So just so you know, we're going to have baptism immediately after service right out here in our kind of the front building by the cross over there. So you guys just anticipate that. It's going to be a great time. And I do want to also acknowledge our team that just got back from Montana. I see several of you guys here. And on behalf of the church, I just want to say thank you for what you did this past week. For the sacrifice of time and energy and sleep and all the stuff that you did to just care for them. I know that it was a lasting impact, and most likely it's a lasting impact on your lives as well. But just awesome work that you're doing, and we look forward to hear more about that work in the coming weeks. We'll make time for that, but thank you very much. For those of you who are just kind of joining with us, we're in the middle of a sermon series that we've titled Next Generation. All right, and so what we're doing is we're kind of focusing on characters and lessons that we want to pass on to our kids. But if you're not a kid in the room, if you're not a student or anything like that, it doesn't matter. If you are a grandparent, if you're a parent, an aunt, uncle, sibling, wherever you're at in your lot of life, I promise you there's going to be some application in here for you. And so I'm mindful of the time. I know we got baptism out there. You picked a good Sunday to be here, all right? If you're kind of like, is this guy going to be long? No, I'm not. So I'm mindful of the time. But I want you to do this. I just want you to, for the next few minutes, just to lean in. And I want you to consider who you are influencing in your life. All of you are influencing somebody, right? And who are you influencing as we talk about this next generation? Last Sunday, I did kind of close alluding to the fact that we would talk about remembering today and the significance of remembering. How many of you saw the opening ceremony of the Olympics and the Last Supper? We talked about that last week a bit, and that kind of helped spur this on a little bit. I want you to know that the perverted image that we saw is not going to be the lasting image. We know what the Last Supper really stands for, and we're going to celebrate that. And you know, one of the things when Jesus broke bread with the disciples, he said, "Do this in remembrance of me." That was one of those examples of remembering, and so we're going to do that today. That image is going to be an image that is going to be cherished forever. It will not be tarnished. But in like manner, we're also going to talk about some things here that I think are going to help you with this subject in particular, and just why it's so important to remember God's goodness in your life, okay? So to open, what I want to do is this. I want to just admit something. I personally do not have the greatest memory in the world. I'm actually kind of, I don't have a good memory. I see automatically, my wife and kids are smiling because they are like, oh, where are we going on this? Me and Jamie talk about this a lot. It amazes me the things that I can't remember, and it also amazes me the weird things that I do remember. Jamie is the opposite. Her mind is this steel trap, man. She can remember what she was doing 20 years ago to the day, who she was with, where she was at, what everybody was wearing, and what they smelled like. It's like all the details. She's got it. I am not that way. And I don't know if it's a man and wife thing or if it's just a Jared and Jamie thing, but I'm just not that way. I'll give you an example. If you were one of the 20, 25 kids in my homeroom classroom in high school, that means that we spent every single morning together for 4 years of our lives. And I promise you that today I can remember one kid's name in that entire class. Like, I can't even remember my teacher's name. I cannot. I can't remember her face. I'm ashamed to say that. It's weird. But on the other hand, okay, if you were to show me a movie with some D-list actors that were not even really famous, but you were to ask me what other movie they were in, man, I could tell you what movie they were in if it was 20 years ago. It's the weirdest thing. Jamie tests me on this all the time. She'll be like, where do we know this guy from? I'll be like, babe, it's the inmate that was sitting to the left of Morgan Freeman on Shawshank Redemption. You know? And she'll be like, well, what's our anniversary? I'm like, don't put me on the spot like that. But it's true. It's like the weirdest thing. So if if there's anybody out there that's like me, and there probably isn't, it's probably just me, but if there's anyone that's even just a little bit like me, we tend to forget the things that we should remember and remember the things that we should forget. It's just this weird, strange phenomenon. But like, how many of you remember 9/11? That's one of those memories I don't forget, okay? I remember that vividly. I was at KSU in my geography class next to my buddy Reagan. Teacher came in, said, class is dismissed. We were all evacuated. We were like, what in the world's going on? So we ran over to Burger King, and we sat down and we watched the news. And that just every second thereafter, man, I can tell you everything that took place. How many of you could do the same? Yeah, we have these core memories, right? And so today there's this 9/11 memorial. There's a museum that's set up for that. And it's set up for the sole purpose of remembering the significance of the event, remembering the lives that were lost, and remembering that unity that we experienced just right thereafter. And there's this slogan, never forget. Never forget as a nation. That's what memorials are about. We got the Vietnam Memorial, MLK. We got so many different memorials that help us as a nation to remember significant events. And we do this in our own lives too, personally. We have these memorials that we set up. And guess what? That was no less true in biblical times. It was no less true. Sometimes when God wanted his people to remember significant events, he would have them construct a memorial for that sole purpose. And so today, as we talk about this next generation and the things that we want to pass on to them, we're going to look back at a significant memorial and what it stands for and what we can learn from it today. Is that okay? All right, so here's what we'll do. I'll give you a little context. I like to do that typically before we get into the passage. In the 4th chapter of the book of Joshua, right, in the 4th chapter of the book of Joshua, the Israelites have just crossed over the Jordan River. All right, that's what's taken place. They've just crossed over. It is a miraculous event. I don't know if you realize this. There was not a bridge across the Jordan. And there's a lot of people in Israel that crossed over this. And so this is a bona fide miracle that has taken place. If we go one chapter earlier, in chapter 3, God spoke to Joshua, the leader, and he told them that he's going to exalt them among the people. And he's going to do it by stopping the flow of water in the Jordan. And so Joshua tells all the people, hey, this is what God's going to do. I'm sure that there was some expectation. How in the world are we going to cross? And then guess what happened? God did it. He did exactly what he said. As soon as the priests' feet hit the water, they're carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and as soon as their feet hit the water, that flow of water stopped. It stopped dead in its tracks. And the Bible says that it was heaped up beside them. It was very reminiscent of something that had taken place years prior. You guys remember the parting of the Red Sea? Moses? Now, this is not new to the Israelites, but it's unique. It's a unique situation. And put yourself in their place for a minute. Imagine this, okay? The book of Numbers chapter 26 tells us that 600,000 men were included in Israel that crossed here. And that's just the men. That means there were also the women and the children. That means that water stopped for a long time for these folks to cross. And up to this point, prior to this, Israel has been roaming around in the wilderness for 40 years. That's what they've been doing. They've been on this quest. They've exited Egypt. They're on this quest, and then they're eating manna from heaven, which is bread from heaven that God has sent them daily to sustain them. Okay, so they're eating that every single day for 40 years. Just imagine if every single day you're on this search for this new land, you cross the Jordan, you enter this land, you've been eating bread every single day, and you're promised milk and honey. This promised land is going to have, it's the land of milk and honey. And here we are, it is finally here. We have crossed, I can see it. Here we go. What are you feeling in that moment? And here's what happens next. God says, time out, hang on. Before you enter, I've got something else for you I want you to do. I want you to do one more thing real quick. And look at what it says. Joshua chapter 4, verse 1. When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, take 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight. So God is basically instructing them to construct a memorial right here. He wants them to remember his power and his faithfulness in their lives. And so this is going to serve as a teaching tool for the next generation. That's what's going to happen. This picture, man, it reminds me of Christmas morning at our house. All right? I don't know if your kids are like me. My kids get up earlier, I feel like, every single year. I don't know if it's 5:30, 4:30, whatever. It's way before the sun comes up on Christmas Day. We got all the presents all over the place, and it's pandemonium. They come barreling down the stairs, and they come sit next to their presents. They're literally shaking. You know, they're like ready to open their presents, just pumped. Me and Jamie, we're pumped, but we got to get our coffee before we can kind of get going. And then we ask them, hey, y'all ready? You ready to open your presents? You ready? Yeah, I'm ready. Okay. What's this day all about, though? Real quick. What's this day about? Dad, we know it's about Jesus. It's not about Santa. It's about Jesus. We know what it's about. I was like, do you, though? Do you really know what it's about? I feel like we need to tell the Christmas story. I feel like this is a good time. We need to remind you what this is really all about. And most times, that's what we do. I don't care that you don't like it. We're going to pause for a minute because it is important, and we're going to remember. I care more about teaching that significance than our pride in that moment, right? And my wife, it definitely helps me stay on track on that right there. But that's the picture here, okay? Before God delivers his people into this promised land, before he lets them go in, these generations that have been waiting, he had them stop for one solitary reason: to remember. He wanted them to remember. He wants to strengthen their faith, and he wants the future generations to walk across, see this memorial, be prompted to ask questions, be given answers, so that they can proceed and move toward the future that he's called them to be in. And if that was true for them then, how much more true is that for us now? I mean, with all the distractions that we have, these folks, at least their grandparents and everything else, they saw them cross the Red Sea. They saw manna literally dropping from heaven and bread being provided for them. They saw the Jordan heaped up on the side. And if it wasn't them, it was their parents. I mean, how much more do we need that today? Each of these 12 men was commanded to go backwards. They were commanded to go back into the river, into their past, and to take up a big, large stone from exactly where the Ark of the Covenant stood, which represents God's power and his presence, and to take it to their place of lodging and to sit it down as a memorial. Here's my question for you. How many treasures are buried in your past that God might want you to unearth, carry into your present, so that the next generation can be reminded of God's goodness in your life? What's he brought you through? If you look back, what can you attest to that God's brought you through? It's important not just that we remember that for ourselves, but that we share that with the next generation, that they might know. And so, how do we do that? Like practically. And why should we do that? I'm going to give you 3 reasons. It's going to be short, all right? I'm going to give you 3 reasons today. If you're taking notes, you can take note of the first one right here. Why it is important to remember God's good works in your life, or his faithfulness in your life, okay? Here we go. Number 1. Remembering helps me to preserve what God has done. Joshua 4, verse 20, starting at verse 20, says this: "And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal. Then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, when your children ask their fathers in time comes, saying, what are these stones? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel crossed over the Jordan on dry land. But the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed over, that all the people of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever." So he's telling them he wants their children to know, verse 22. He wants all people to know, verse 24, what he's done. He is wanting this to be preserved. Preservation means this, okay? It means you're maintaining something in its original state. You're keeping it in your, I think about preserves, jams and jellies, and how we preserve those things and we keep them for a really long time. I like watching these like Alaska shows, The Last Frontier, and like when they're off on the grid and they're surviving in the wilderness, I get caught up in that stuff because it amazes me how they can survive off of next to nothing. I mean, these guys will live in an 8-month winter off of salmon and berries. I mean, they know how to preserve. I would die. I would die. There's no way. But it's amazing to me how they do that. On a spiritual note here, okay, preservation. As a pastor, one of the greatest joys of my job and in my life is getting to be a part of baptism. It's what we get to see today. I mean, it really, truly is. I love seeing people come to the faith and being bold in the faith and declaring their faith, especially children. And so we all get to see that today, and I've already talked to some of you who are just like giddy. We're like kids ourselves, and it's just seeing that excitement and seeing that enthusiasm on these kids' faces, on these adults' faces. It's contagious. You will feel it today. You will experience that same thing. But for all the mature Christians in the room who may have been saved for a little while now, you know one of the challenges of this faith is maintaining that enthusiasm and that excitement and that zest, because we have ups and downs in life. We experience trials. We experience all kinds of difficulties, tragedies and things like that, and temptation, and we fall. And so then it's like, I don't know, can I do that? We have those feelings, those things that we go through. King David knew exactly what that was like. King David had fallen morally, just completely fell into sin, into serious sin, murder and adultery, okay? And he cries out to God. In Psalms 51:12, we hear this cry, and he says, Lord, restore to me the joy of your salvation and uphold me by your generous spirit. What he's saying is, remind me of the insatiable joy that I have by your saving grace, that I might not sin against you, that I might follow through with your will and with your call for my life. Lord, help me to remember. Remembering God's goodness in your life and celebrating that, it's one of the best ways ever to preserve what God has done in your life. It's how we restore that joy of our salvation, is remembering. So my question for you on this point, and I'll have these questions up too, just because I want you to kind of think about them this week and ask yourself, what are you doing to preserve God's work for the next generation? What are you doing to preserve it? There's practical things that you can do to preserve his work. One of the things I've done in the past is journal. I would write what was significant, what I saw God doing in my life that meant something to me, and I did that over and over and over. I've got thousands of pages that have been written about God's faithfulness in my life. I could spend sermons just talking to you about what all he's done in my life. It's a way that I've preserved. You can take pictures. We all take tons of pictures these days. Social media is a way that we log all kinds of information about our life. We tell people what's going on. That is a great platform to preserve what God is doing in your life and to promote that publicly. There's activities. Sometimes we create trips to remind us of something significant that happened or to celebrate someone in our life or something like that. You can create activities, trips, things like that help you to preserve what God has done. Allow your mind to think about this. It's important, all right? Number 2, second reason it's important. Remembering allows me to participate in what God is doing and what he's doing right now. All right, let's think about Israel. They were enslaved for 400 years. For 400 years. They're then wandering the wilderness for 40-something years, for 40 years, right? And I can just imagine what they're feeling, what they're going through. I've never been through something like that. I've never had to wait that long. But I imagine they're asking the same question that my kids, your kids, all kids ask when they're on a road trip. Are we there yet? God, this is getting ridiculous. Are we there yet? I mean, when are we going to get there? This is taking way too long. And so here we go. This is a brand new day. They are there yet. They're there. They have made it to the river. One generation was just wandering around the wilderness homeless. The next generation is going into their homeland, into a land of prosperity. And God is using this as a time to get them to heed his instruction. What he's saying is, I do not want you to enter this haphazardly. I don't want you to enter this land quickly. Take your time. I want to experience this. I want you to experience this with me. What it reminds me of, personally, there's a personal picture that I'm reminded of, and that is my wedding day. For those of you who don't know my wife, Jamie, and I, we were married in August of 2020, August 28th, 2020. I did remember our anniversary, so I do know that. It was in the middle of the pandemic. David, you got that picture? If you'll show the picture up there. That's us. I had some hair there. The girls are a little bit younger there. Jamie, beautiful as ever. I didn't get any permission for this, so hopefully this is going to be okay. But our story is a story of redemption. Both of us have been through a divorce prior in our lives, and we had to walk through that. We had to walk through that with our kids. They had to walk through that with us. It was a very difficult season, and it was one that we learned a lot from, as I know many of you have been through so many difficult seasons. And so God led us through our own wilderness journey and introduced us to each other. And today, we get to enjoy doing ministry together, doing life together, and God's teaching us every single day to slow down and to experience him. And I just want to say I love you. Thank you. Thank you. I know that I'm embarrassing you, but I just want to say you are the best mama, the best wife, and I am proud as heck of you. I just want you to know that. Sorry, this is off subject. She's getting embarrassed. My apologies. But here's the deal. This picture right here, it hangs in our living room, all right? It hangs above our sofa. And it is a memorial for our family. It sits right next to our kissing picture, by the way, which the girls, I don't think that any of them really appreciate it. They walk into the room like, hey, everybody. But, we traumatize them a little bit, but it's worth it because that's for us. But it sits right there in the middle of the living room, and it reminds us not just of what God did, but of what he is doing, what we get to be a part of right now, what we get to experience. It is a daily reminder that we get to participate in something with God. We're raising 3 beautiful daughters who we pray are going to outlive us and exemplify God's goodness to this next generation. We get to do that. You too get to do that, right? And it's just an amazing thing. One note I will also say about this I think is significant. It's not just the picture itself that's significant to me and my family, but it's the placement. It's right there in the middle of our living room, constantly reminding us of what God's doing. Those 12 stones were taken out of the river where God's presence was tangible and what he had done, and placed in their place of lodging to remind them of his goodness. So I say that to you to say whatever your memorials are, whatever your reminders are, consider their placement, okay? And my question for you on this point is this: what are you participating in that will outlive you? What are you participating in that will outlive you? It might be something with your family, it might be something with your career, it may be something, some personal pursuit. Hopefully you're doing some things with your church, you guys right here. But we've been talking for a while about this building program that's coming up. Guess what? That building, it's not about us. It's about the next generation. Why are we doing it? Because God told us to. We're on assignment. We have a mission. Look at this room. Look at these kids that were just in here. We're going to do this for them, and it's going to outlive us. And I encourage all of you to participate in that. We're going to be saying more about that in the coming days, strategically and specifically how you can get involved, not just monetarily, but how you can get involved in making a difference in this next generation. Scripture tells us that your life is a vapor. You're not promised tomorrow. You're not. So get involved in something that will outlive you and that you can look at and participate in with God, okay? And the third reason right here, you write this down. The third reason it's important to remember God's goodness. Remembering gives me confidence to trust in what God will do. It gives me the confidence to trust in what he will do. The people of Israel for 440 years, they've seen God's hand at work. They've seen that he's proved himself faithful, and time again, he reveals that to them. And even though that is the case, I assure you that they were still asking this one question: God, how? How can I do this? I'm facing something that's impossible. How is this going to work? And I think that God's response, he didn't literally say this, but it's basically, you can't, but I can. Place your trust in me. Believe in me. Have faith. I am going to reveal the path to you. And that's exactly what he did to them. I mean, he proved himself every single time. The Red Sea, manna from heaven, and here we go, the Jordan River. Again, imagine this. It's heaped up to the side. These 600,000 men, and then the women, and then the children have all crossed over. Here it is. We've placed our stones. We've created this memorial. We've done what God said, and we have made it to the promised land, right? Hang on. Look at this next verse. Look at this. Joshua 4:19. The people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. How many of you have ever heard of Jericho? We were kids in Sunday school. What's the one thing we remember about Jericho? It's got some big old walls. There's a fortified fortress in front of us. And to cross over into the promised land, we're going to have to fight. We're going to have to overcome this city that is known as the most fortified place around. How? How in the world are we going to do this, God? You see, God knew what was coming. He knew they were going to be scared to death. He knew that once they cross over into this land, they're going to be shaken. And that's why he said, stop. Remember. Remember this. Remember what I'm doing, because the only way that you are going to get into the destiny that I have called you to step into is if you remember what I have brought you through. That's going to give you the confidence to face what you're facing. And so my question to all of you is, what current obstacle are you facing that you need to consider in light of God's previous works? I know you're facing something. I know you have a hurdle that you're up against. I know that each of you are going through a lot in your life right now. You need to be reminded that God is faithful. He is able. He is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. And whatever those walls are in your life, whatever they look like, however impossible they may seem, remember this. Those walls of Jericho, those impenetrable walls, they came tumbling down. That's another story for another day. We'll save it. They did not last. God supernaturally intervened. And he can supernaturally intervene in your life. Today it's about remembering his faithfulness. Remembering will help you preserve what God has done. Remembering will allow you to participate in what God is doing. And remembering will give you the confidence to trust in what God is going to do. These people in Israel had to learn this lesson. And so must we. Because it's not about you. This next generation depends on it. They depend on it. My message for you today is about as simple as I don't normally title messages, but I'm going to title it today. I want you to remember it. Don't forget to remember. Don't forget to remember. Let me just say, too, to the younger generation, to the youth, and to you guys, sometimes you hear something like this, you're like, well, God's done some stuff in my life. I don't know if it's really all that significant. It is significant. He has done a ton in your lives personally. You guys have made it through a pandemic early in your life. God has a plan and a purpose for you, and he's going to use you mightily. And we as a church, body of believers, are going to unite around you. We're going to equip you, and we're going to support you because we know God's got big, big things in store for you. I want you to know that. And I also want to say, if there's anybody here that's a guest and maybe, you hear this and it resonates to some extent, but you don't really have a relationship with the one true living God, I want you to know his name is Jesus Christ. And if there's anything in you, if you feel a tug in your spirit, if you feel something like, man, I remember, I don't know this God that well, but I know there is one. I know he's saved me from so much in my life, and I'd like to know more about him. If that's you, I want you to know I'd love to talk to you directly, answer any questions that you have, pray with you. After baptism today, you're welcome to come up and talk to me, Pastor Terry, our leaders. One of the cool things about being a small church is you get to know everybody. And so you're welcome. I would love to lead you in that prayer, all right? But I'm going to close us in prayer, and then we'll get on with our day, all right? Father, I just thank you for this day and for your goodness in our lives, for everything that you have done, for everything that you are doing, and for everything that you're going to do. And Lord, I pray that this word would resonate in the hearts and in the minds in this room. Lord, that we would practically apply this to our lives. Lord, that we would glorify you by remembering the goodness that you've done. Lord, that would propel us to do amazing things for you, to go out and to reach others for your sake. God, I pray that you would ignite something in the hearts of this room, God, that lives would be changed and transformed. And Lord, I pray for those that are not in this room, those that are not here yet, that are our assignment. I ask, God, that you would strengthen us to face whatever walls in our life there are, so that we can go and we can take the promised land, God, that we can reach others for you, that they might know you and know you for all eternity. Lord, we love you and we thank you for this assignment that you've placed on our lives. We give you this day in the mighty name of Jesus.